You know a spot, but not just a spot, the spot. Actually, with the all-new Nissan Frontier, you know a bunch of them. One for hitting a trail. One for catching a wave. One where this happened.
Yo, where'd our tent go?
Another where the fish get bigger every time you tell the story. Some spots, you made your mark. Others marked you. And one, okay, let's stay away from that one. But the key to these great spots? Being able to reach them in the first place. Your spot is out there. Find your frontier in the all-new 2022 Nissan Frontier. With best-in-class standard 310 horsepower, advanced tech, and 281 pound-foot of torque. Comparison based on 2022 Frontier S versus latest in-market Ward small truck segment. Base models compared based on manufacturer's website.
This is Donald Parham of the LA Chargers, and you're listening to Chargers Unleashed, part of the LAFB Network. Stay jiggy.
You know a spot, but not just a spot, the spot. Actually, with the all-new Nissan Frontier, you know a bunch of them. One for hitting a trail. One for catching a wave. One where this happened.
Yo, where'd our tent go?
Another where the fish get bigger every time you tell the story. Some spots, you made your mark. Others marked you. And one, okay, let's stay away from that one. But the key to these great spots? Being able to reach them in the first place. Your spot is out there. Find your frontier in the all-new 2022 Nissan Frontier. With best-in-class standard 310 horsepower, advanced tech, and 281 pound-foot of torque. Comparison based on 2022 Frontier S versus latest in-market Ward small truck segment. Base models compared based on manufacturer's website.
Welcome to another episode of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. Today's show, of course, is being brought to you by Brewery X, UFC Fit, Charger Bolt Family, and Manscaped. Make sure to use the promo code LAFB20 for your next purchase and get 20% off. Promo code LAFB. Go to manscaped.com for more details. Dan, week 2 of preseason's in the books. One more game remaining before all eyes turn toward the regular season for the Los Angeles Chargers.
Jake, how are you, my friend? We have 1 week left before, we're talking regular season week 1. How are you feeling? What's your vibe for these Chargers right now?
Hey, it's better than what it was during the purgatory season. I'm just ready to get this season started. It's weird because it's not 4 traditional preseason games anymore. So once week 3 is done, it's almost going to feel like a little bit of a mini bye before the regular season actually gets started for the Chargers. So a little bit of a waiting period, but hey, nonetheless, we're that much closer to the regular season. So let's go.
Yes, I got to say, shout out to Jake Hefner. You've been on a few shows recently, so special guest. I think you've been on Charger Bolt, Charger Chat podcast. You've also been on, I think Guilty as Charged had a group chat that you guys were all doing. So if you guys haven't get a chance to check him out, go check out Jake on both of those episodes. He did an awesome job.
I had time. I had an afternoon free. Yeah.
All right. So today we're going to talk about week 2.
Yep.
And the Chargers loss, quote unquote. We're going to talk about latest roster cuts. We'll talk about roster battles. And let's get after it. So Jake, the Chargers lost 15-10 to the 49ers. What was your overall kind of feeling after the game? Were you impressed? Were you upset? Were you disappointed?
There were good things to take away from the game. Some glaring things to take away that definitely unfortunately need some work. But again, you kind of have to measure what it is that you're looking at as well. I mean, there were a lot of players that didn't end up playing this game. Majority is your 2 and your 3s. Obviously, Justin Herbert's not playing this game, so it's all evaluation of your backup quarterbacks who, for the most part, it just seemed like it was check down offense, vanilla, Nothing really downfield with the exception of a few passes. You know, I mean, it wasn't really anything to gush about in that circumstance. But yes, there were certain players that stood out and some that stood out in the wrong type of way.
That's a good way of putting it. That's so nice. Yeah, I mean, look, it goes back to what preseason is about and what you're looking for and what this coaching staff is looking for. Like at this point, and I try to kind of preface this with like, let's put this in perspective, Jake. Like, we're not sitting here having to worry about who our QB1 is. Like, we're not having to worry about who our starting offensive line is or even our starting linebackers. There's no position that we're worried about who is starting. And most of them, except for maybe offensive line, we're not even worried about who's a backup. So, like, for us to be here nitpicking, like, who's going to be the safety 3 and who's going to be, like, the offensive line number 4, like, we're in a good spot. So for folks who are all, like, June and gloom because our offensive line was atrocious in this last preseason game, like, yes, they did not perform well. But like you said, Jake, when we saw, like, Brandon Faison go up against the ones, like, I think this is done purposefully by Brandon Staley to kind of give them trial by fire, let them see what they are going up against, and show them where they are at. Like, how better can you do that than watch you against good competition? And again, to preface what we saw on Sunday, Chargers rested almost the entire starting unit, aside from like a couple linebackers, a couple edge players. Otherwise, like, everybody is depth. And we're going up against a Niners team that started a ton of players, including their top quarterback and a lot of their top receivers, and also the guy who's supposed to be like the prodigy. So, like, put it in perspective. Like, Chargers 2s and 3s are going up against a lot of Niners 1s and 2s. So just take a deep breath, Chargers fans, before you go crazy.
Real quick, I'm going to come to the defense of the people who want to, you know, exude a little bit of emotion, as you said, Dan, when talking about like the number 3 safety on this team, or, you know, the 4th string offensive tackle, whatever that is. At least you know that those group of people that are showing that type of emotion and that type of frustration about those type of situations, you know that they're the dedicated ones, which is great to see.
Shout out.
But on the flip side, calm down. Calm down, everyone. For the love of God, calm down. Yes, put it into perspective, as Dan said, what it is that we're actually watching here. Still a preseason game at the end of the day. Let's take it in context. I know most of the reason why we worry about depth pieces so much is because, unfortunately, in years past, most of the time, these guys do end up playing starting minutes. So you don't like to see negative plays go against these guys. So I get it. But yes, still just take into context on what you're working with. But Dan, first off, takeaways. Give me some good and bad. What did you see?
All right, so let's kick it off with the bad. Just to get out of the way. Offensive line play was not good. And folks who were talking about, like, oh my goodness, these quarterbacks are terrible and Stick is now obviously QB2, like, whoa. Again, remember, the offensive line did not look good. But for folks who are, like, crying that we're all of a sudden going to be screwed, the offensive line did not look good. But if the Chargers are left with that starting 5 as their offensive line in any point of this season, like, we have much bigger problems. And also, Chase Daniel and Easton Stick, people were talking about how, like, the quarterbacks weren't looking that great. Like, they looked pretty good, all things considered. Like, they were under constant duress the entire game. And if you go back and look at just, like, the stat line, Chase Daniel, I think, was like 14 for 21, had 1 interception, but, like, the dude was getting mauled every play, it seemed. And then Easton Stick, everyone is all excited about how good he did. But remember, he's going up against a team, like, he had one really good play, good throw to Guyton for that long, I think it was like 40 yards. He had the nice off-script play to Josh Palmer for the touchdown. But, like, both of them look good. And I don't know where you and I sit on this, but, like, the QB2, 3, like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, I think either one of them are going to put us in a good spot. Personally, I think I think Chase Daniel gives us the best ability to weather the storm if someone like a Justin Herbert goes down for a week or two. Now, if Justin Herbert goes down for the season, like throw it all out the window. It's a whole different ballgame. But give Easton Stick, excuse me, I keep saying that. Give Chase Daniel, our starting offensive line, give him Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, all these guys that were not there this past week. Like, he'll be fine. Like, he's a game manager. That's what he brings. So the bad, I would say offensive line. Honestly, there weren't really any other poor performances. Like all the other poor performances that I saw was a factor of the poor offensive line play. And again, it's not just poor offensive line play. The San Francisco 49ers, they are built around their defensive line. And that front is arguably one of the best in the league and the deepest in the league. So they wreaked havoc on a lot of things. So the running game wasn't good, but also because of our offensive line. So I guess the bad, if you want to say quarterback play, you want to say offensive line, you want to say penalties, I think were an issue. You saw some that were not really necessary. Asante Samuel had a kind of annoying penalty, which is kind of a weird one. Like the back of the end zone took his helmet off. There really weren't, like, for what you're expecting and what you're looking for, there really wasn't that much bad. I saw more good than bad. I don't know about you.
I mean, just in total, just the offense, I think maybe that would draw people to believe that there was more bad, is that the quarterback play wasn't anything that was out of this world. You know, Easton Stick, what was it? He ended up going, it was 10 of 14 for 85 yards, and 38 of those yards came on one pass to Jalen Guyton that he threw downfield. There was another long pass that I think that he threw in the first series where he hung Steven Anderson out to dry. Ball went right over his head. Could have been a lot worse. Thankfully, it wasn't. And yeah, as you mentioned, he had that great improv play where he was patient, double clutched it, went to the sideline, looked like he was going out of bounds, found Josh Palmer at the back end of the end zone. And you know, those were his plays. Other than that, it was mainly just check down. I wasn't impressed with the running game. I know that Larry Roundtree felt like he, building off of what his week one performance was, he wasn't able to replicate what he did in week one as to week two. I didn't feel like there was any holes opening up in the run game for either Kelly or Roundtree in reality. But yeah, this was more of a check down game. It wasn't anything that was downfield, and not that you would expect either one of these guys to do that, but you'd like to see the offense open up a little bit. It just seemed like the same thing. I got to tell you, one of the things that really, really hit me that looked familiar in the worst type of way was the 2-minute drill at the end of the first half, the defense, to have Trey Lance march right down the field. It looked reminiscent of a defense under a different regime that we had last year, that normally right when you get a touchdown for your offense, you allow an opposing team to go right back down the field and put up 7 on the board. All too familiar. All the wrong reasons. Didn't like that at all. You got to believe that Brandon Staley didn't like that either. The offensive line play is just way too obvious to pick apart. Storm Norton, Trey Pipkins.
Drink.
I said it on Twitter. I will stand by it. I've said it on this show on repeat now. The Trey Pipkins experiment has failed. And when I say that, do I mean that he can't play football? I'm not saying that. I'm saying for the standpoint in which the Chargers drafted him with a high 3rd round draft pick, for a guy who on a lot of people's boards when he was taken wasn't even in the top 150 for them. So right off the bat, it was looked at as a reach. You knew that he was a raw developmental prospect, and we're now in year 3, Dan? And even in a new regime, unfortunately just doesn't seem like there's any improvement taking place. So honestly, I think that the only reason that the cord hasn't been cut yet is because he was a 3rd round pick.
That's fair.
Is it fair to say that?
Yeah, and I mean, you've heard Brandon Staley talk about, like, there's, I think Chris Harry mentioned on our show that we had a while back, like, there's still meat on the bone there, and there is still potential that I think people are, like, holding on to. And, like, I'll give him that. And I think what was hard for me to watch was like just the effort didn't seem as high as I would have liked to see. If you're not performing well, like at least try hard. And like you saw the safety that was given up. And guy just got bull rushed. Like it wasn't any crazy technique. And he got bull rushed. Quarterback goes down. And he kind of just like shrugged it off like not again. And like that's the stuff that I think bothers me. And if I'm Coach Staley, if I'm Coach Lombardi, who do I trust more to come in if someone's hurt or needs a break? Like, do I trust a Trey Pipkins? Like, whose floor is higher? Trey Pipkins, Storm Norton, St. Louis. You could potentially bring like Matt Filer, swing him out, whatever. But like, it seems as though right now Trey Pipkins' floor is lower than the rest, and you see it on Sundays.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up Brandon Staley because he had a very honest and some might just take it straightforward comment and direct, where yes, and I'm glad you said that because previous regimes would just say, he's coming along, he's developing, Brandon Staley just shot from the hip and told you the way it is, and not just for Trey Pipkins. Told it for Storm Norton as well because both guys struggled during this game. And he said, I think those two guys got a really accurate picture of where they're at. I think as a coach, that was about the nicest way that you could say that situation. But as you were saying, Dan, who do you trust more? Well, unfortunately, Storm Norton didn't do much to break away from the pack or say that he's any better of an option than Trey Pipkins at this point. So, it was a bad game for both guys. Hopefully for week 3 they can rebound a little bit, and then this is going to get really interesting come final cut down time. But to me, I mean, hey, I don't know if it's me saying, would I rather have Trey Pipkins on the roster or would I rather keep an extra defensive back? I'm going to say I'm rather going to keep the extra defensive back or the extra interior defensive lineman. That's the route that I would go based off of what I saw.
I don't think you're wrong. Well, okay, enough of the June gloom. Like we've already gone like 15 minutes and we're still talking about negativity because like there were things that could improve. But on the whole, Jake, I don't know if you agree, but on the whole, I was pretty darn impressed with what I saw on Sunday against Niners team that played a ton of starters, and it's kind of like a defensive slugfest. But like we saw some dudes ball out, and we saw like a defensive scheme that we have not seen in years past, and it gets you excited for what's to come.
Yeah, it was nice to see the turnovers that the Chargers were able to cause, literally almost identical between Asante Samuel Jr. and who was it, Devontae Campbell? Who got the other one?
I think it was Tavon Campbell.
Tavon Campbell, sorry. Tavon Campbell, excuse me. Literally, they were both just tip passes, and they were both literally, it seemed like, right in the same spot. And they were able to get the picks, which was great. Kyler Fackrell.
Hello.
I really love this free agent acquisition. Loved it when it first happened. I really thought that he was going to be more of that rotational pass rusher, situational guy. You put him behind Uchenna Nwosu, boy, has he put that notion to bed, because he's giving Uchenna Nwosu a run for his money to start opposite Joey Bosa right now. The pressure that he was getting on, he ended up getting a sack as well. You look at some other great things that were done in this game. I'm calling for it because initially I said it was a long shot, but my new nickname for him is Bowling Ball 66. Forrest Merrill showing up in the interior defensive line for the second straight week. Gotta love to see it from a penetration from a guy who is basically clawing his way from the bottom. And when you're talking about a position to really keep your eye out on, where there could be some key spots open for depth, this is definitely one. So nice to see Forrest Merrill get in there. I just felt like overall there was a lot more standouts on the defensive side of the ball than there was on the offense for this game. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, there was lots to hang your hand on. Nick Neiman had another great game.
Yes, he did.
As a 6th-round rookie. Had another great game for the second straight week. So definitely things that you can take away from this that are positive moving forward, for sure.
It was interesting. Brandon Staley had a press conference afterwards and was kind of talking about like some of his kind of key takeaways. And seeing both Drew Tranquil and Kenneth Murray play alongside each other and seeing like just the linebacking core as a unit, I think looked very good. And Kaiser White is bursting onto the scenes, and he mentioned he's had arguably the best training camp / preseason of any player on the team. And seeing those three linebackers being able to play reps together and getting Kenneth Murray back and kind of having those guys gel. And if you just go back and watch the series they're in and just focus on the linebackers, they are on it. Like they double click fast. And that was probably one thing I noticed. Obviously, shout out Asante Samuel Jr., first pick of his career. Loved seeing that. You got the penalty at the end of it, but like it's a preseason game. It's fine. Jake, we had a kicker who made a 50 or 51-yard field goal.
He made a what?
51-yard field goal.
From how long?
50 plus.
And it was good?
It was good. I got a video. Like the entire stadium was like, well, you know how this is gonna go. And
Dan,
I'm like, oh, what?
What did I tell you 2 weeks ago, man? Are you seeing it now? Are you seeing it now? Because just a week ago, we were talking about, okay, this guy I know has the lead now for the kicking job. You know, he had a practice where he went 5 for 5. He was perfect. He came out last week, did very well. This time, Badgley's the only one that gets an opportunity to kick a field goal in this game. As you said, 51 yards. It's good. Prior to that, I think it was Friday, he ended up doing better than Tristan in practice. I think Tristan on that day went 3 for 6, where Badgley went, I think, 5 for 6. I can't remember all the distance differences. But did I not tell you that this is how poetic this is for the Chargers kicking situation? That this is how this is going to shift. It's literally this fluid. And it's going to come down to the final preseason game. Hopefully both guys get an equal opportunity to show what they can do. But everything from today through this final preseason game, every kick is critical for both of these guys, because I honestly think it's so close right now. I know most people would probably say, okay, Vizcaino has the lead. He's been more consistent. That's totally fair to say. But I don't know, man. I don't know what the way that it's going. It just seems like it's a damn teeter-totter that's gone like this over the past 2 weeks. At this point, who knows who is going to win the Chargers starting kicking position?
The one thing I will say, and this is why I keep leaning towards Vizcaino, and I like Michael Badgley. Like I rooted for him all season last year, and I was probably the last person to be like, okay, fine. Like he's not.
Yeah, you finally came around.
I did. But what I keep going back to is like we're not going to forget, and those players aren't going to forget. The coaching staff might, but the players won't, and we won't. Fast forward, week 1, Chargers down 17-19. We're at the 50, or for a 51-yard field goal to win it. Michael Badgley comes out to kick. How are you feeling? Like that look is exactly how you're going to feel. And I don't care if Michael Badgley goes 10 for 10, doesn't miss another kick the rest of preseason and practice. That feeling is going to stick come week 1 or week 2 or whenever that comes. And I don't think, personally, like I don't know if that's something the team wants to keep. Like, I mean, you could argue they might have that feeling regardless of who is going to be playing or who's going to be kicking. But like, especially Michael Badgley early. Now, maybe he makes a kick or two early, and all of a sudden he, conquers all those fears, and everybody starts feeling better. But man, like at the beginning of the season, like let's say he goes out and misses one, like, dude, this place is going to go crazy.
You know the kicking situation is fluid when you have one preseason game remaining and you get news early this morning that the Colts just waived Eddie Pinheiro, and within a half hour there are tweets flying around all from Chargers fans saying, hey, I wouldn't mind bringing this guy in to add to the competition. Can't hurt, right? You know how fluid this kicking situation is, Dan. And like you said, the fan base definitely will never forget, and they'll be the first one to remind you how much the kicking situation means to this team. Michael Badgley missed 12 kicks last year. So, yeah, I can still agree with you right now. Week 1, if Badgley is the guy that comes out of this battle, regardless whether or not he kicks every single field goal from 70 yards, I don't even care.
It's true.
Come clutch time, what we believed he was there for, what earned him the name of Money Badger in the first place, I do not have a shred of confidence, because I will be just as stressed out in week 1 as I was watching all 12 of those botched kicks from last year.
Would you rather have, if we had to bring someone in, would you rather have more depth at, I don't know, corner, safety, interior defensive line, offensive line, or kicker? Who would you want?
I'm trying to stay consistent and not go back on what I've said, because you just named off 2 positions that I said over the last month. Interior defensive line and safety, I still believe, are 2 spots that the Chargers could use a little bit more veteran presence, and who knows what's going to happen. Yes, maybe not so much interior defensive line from what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, but I think from the safety standpoint, you still could use another body back there. And again, who knows who's going to be a surprise cut over this last week of preseason. So normally my heart should say that, but hey, when you have a kicking situation that's, could crumble at any moment like a damn earthquake fault, who knows? I mean, but one thing I definitely don't want to be, I don't want to be one of these turnstile teams back when it was like the Caleb Sturgis days. And then it was 4 weeks of that. And then it had to be a different kicker and 2 weeks of that, and then change to a different kicker. I definitely don't want a turnstile competition for a kicking scenario. Let's get a guy who's consistent, who can make a 50-yard field goal in a clutch situation and not miss an extra point. How about that? I think that sounds simple enough.
A fun fact: if you knew that a kicker that you drafted could be Justin Tucker, like if you knew it, how early in the draft would you pick one? Like what round?
I'd say it's worth a 5th round pick.
What?
Right? What do you mean?
Right now,
if you're telling me, hang on, let me just say that again, Dan. Remember what team you're talking about here.
No. I'm saying if you knew if you knew the guy was going to be as good as Justin Tucker,
right?
So you're going to be drafting Justin Tucker. What will be the earliest round you draft him?
Okay, well, Dan, let's talk about this for a second. Okay, so when do you normally draft kickers in the draft? And
I know.
We're not talking fantasy football here, so it's definitely not the last round.
I'm talking desperation right now. The Chargers drastically need a kicker, like desperately. And right now, if the Chargers can go, quote unquote, draft Justin Tucker, you're waiting until the 5th round?
Please enlighten me when you'd be drafting a kicker if you knew he was going to turn into Justin Tucker. Let's also remember certain guys that were. Look, there's been very few specialists that have been taken in the first round or the second round that have had good careers.
I'm just saying, if you knew, like if we all knew, like if we can guarantee I'm getting Justin Tucker for 10 years, you wouldn't spend like a 2nd round pick on him? Even a 1st? Like arguably
not a 1st.
Arguably, that is the biggest need of this team right now.
Yeah, I'm not. I get it.
Oh,
I get
Jake.
that. But you're telling me that it's wrong of me to not think that I would spend a first round pick on a kicker.
No, okay. There's a difference between a first and a fifth. A fifth? Oh, okay. Chargers fans, Chargers Unleashed listeners, I want you to tell me if I'm crazy.
Look, I get your argument, Dan. Okay, I get your argument,
bro.
Okay. I'll humor you, and I'll take it up to a fourth. How does that sound?
Sounds like you're not getting Justin Tucker. That's what it sounds like. All right. So enough.
Justin Tucker was an undrafted free agent. Okay. And okay. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, and I'll go to a fourth. I'll put that as the ceiling. I will not go to a first or a second round pick.
Oh, I would gladly take a second round pick on Justin Tucker if I knew it was going to be Justin Tucker. Look.
Okay.
Anyways, okay, so Chargers need to figure out their kicking situation. Other than the topics we talked about quarterback, talked about Tavon Campbell, talked about Kaiser White looking good, Nick Niemann, Badgley making kicks, Drew and Kenneth, and the linebacking core as a whole looking good. Interior defensive line looks good. Overall, I think, a couple of the guys, Jake, I like to call him Jesse Lemonade, but Jesse Lemonnier, I believe is how you pronounce it.
Lemonnier.
He looked good. And overall, I think where I see the best improvement in this Chargers defense is it just looks like this defense is hunting for the football and like is seeking it out. And when it gets the opportunity, like they seem to get it. And you just hadn't seen that aggressiveness in years past. And so, like, when's the last time the Chargers got 3 turnovers in a game? Like,
it's been a minute. It's been a minute.
So, and honestly, they could have easily had 2 more. I think it was Tavon Campbell had his hands on another pick, like, no problem. So, I don't know. This defense has me very excited. And again, we talked about it, like, the depth of the defense is what has me excited. Like, yes, we got Derwin James. Yes, we got Chris Harris. But it's that underbelly that I think is getting so much better. That's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to see this all happening with a number of your guys that are the 2s and the 3s. So I think the scheme philosophy is there. It's catching on. What's the word I'm trying to say? The coaching dynamic isn't changing on your personnel, if you will. So they're still staying aggressive, as you're mentioning. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's nice to see these guys that are potential long shots to make the roster being able to still be productive. Other guys, as you mentioned, when you see guys like Nick Niemann standing out for a guy who was a 6th round pick, and I think that definitely has a little bit to do for the fact that he's got some coaching ties to where he was in college. But Nick Niemann, say what you will, even as a reserve linebacker, when you're playing against behind the likes of Drew Trank, Will Kaiser White, and Kenneth Murray, it's nice to see a depth piece like that showing out. It's just going to make your locker room that much better at that position. So
Mark Webb looked great too. Glad to see him back.
You know, it was nice to see Mark Webb in a game because I know he didn't end up getting a chance to play. Yeah, well, see, that was the thing. He came in with a monster hit. And then the unfortunate part, I think it was the very next play or maybe 2 plays later where just complete confusion in the secondary, blown coverage. He was looking at his guy saying, oh, well, you should have had him here. You should have had him. Yeah, and it didn't work. So got to fix those little problems. But yeah, it was nice to see Mark Webb back in the game.
So the Chargers are going to be taking their 3rd preseason game in Seattle. Before we get into the roster cuts and kind of roster battles that we're going to be looking for, are there any like major takeaways or things you're looking at for the Seattle game? Like at this point, it's what? Like who's going to be our kicker? Who's our wide receiver 6?
Yeah, I mean, we got a few answers on that today, and we'll get to that in a second. Looking ahead, yeah, I think the kicker battle has to be at the forefront of it. You're going to hope for some better play on the offensive line, no matter who it is that needs some improvement. In reality, after what we saw this past week, it seemed like everybody could use some improvement, with the exception of Brandon Hymas, because Brandon Hymas still looked very good. He was one of the few, if not the only, bright spot of the offensive line that played last week. How about your running back battle? How's that going to go? Again, Joshua Kelly got the starting nod in this game against San Francisco, which I was a bit surprised about, but I felt like the rep count for him, I felt like they pulled his reps a little bit earlier and started getting Roundtree more involved in the game earlier than they did the previous week. So I'm interested to see how that's going to go, and I'm interested to see what is going to happen as far as who's going to win that RB3 battle, and is Justin Jackson going to return? Who knows?
Or even RB2.
Yeah. I'm not going to go as far as to say that either one of these guys has solidified RB2. I know that Roundtree showed out in the first preseason game much better than Joshua Kelly did. I still believe that he is going to overtake that RB3 position from Josh Kelly. As much as I have been an advocate of Josh Kelly for the last year, Roundtree, to me, I think just has it a little bit more. So that'll be an interesting battle to watch. Of course, yes, the wide receiver battle of the 18 wide receivers that it seems that the Chargers have on this roster. Who's going to win those final 6 or 7 spots? So yeah, I mean, obviously this is going to be a monster time for the rookies to show out. Would I expect guys like Kaiser White, Drew Tranquil, and Kenneth Murray to play? Nah, not so much. This is the time for the rest of your depth to play out and earn these roster spots. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting final season or week of the preseason.
All right, so we'll put a bow on week 2. All right, so before we get into talking about the roster cuts that have happened this week, this episode is brought to you by UFC Fit in Temecula. If you guys have not gotten your workout routine in full force, you're kind of late because winter's just around the corner. But UFC Fit in Temecula has an incredible recovery room. They've got cryotherapy. They've got a hydro massage. They've got compression. They've got all kinds of stuff to help you out for recovery. They also have all kinds of boxing classes. They've got different types of karate. They've got spin classes and all of the machines, steam room, sauna, pool, you name it. UFC Fit in Temecula. Check them out. They are brand new, and they have incredible staff. Tell them Chargers Unleashed sent you. So, Jake, some folks were cut on this team, and some, especially one, was a bit of a surprise. What was the news out of Chargers camp today?
So the Chargers trimmed their roster down yet again today. And unfortunately, among the casualties was none other than our very own Ryan Dairude's favorites. Austin Proehl was cut today. And that was the one that really stood out to me. I'm sure a lot of other people, given the fact that Austin Proehl has been a baller throughout the entirety of training camp. Dan, I know you went to training camp more than I do, but I don't recall ever reading a sentence where Austin Proehl dropped a punt, dropped a kickoff, dropped a pass. And I especially thought, with the lack of reps that Joe Reed was getting, especially as a return man, that Austin Proehl had literally come in there and taken his job away. And I thought leading up to this was going to be a shoo-in to win one of the final receiving positions. And unfortunately today, he was one of the 6 players that were cut. And then Daniel Popper shed some light on it. Apparently, why we didn't end up seeing him during week 2 of the preseason was because there was an injury that was sustained. I never heard about it. Apparently nobody else heard about it. It was something that was very low key. But I'm also thinking to myself, we knew that Joe Reed was in a walking boot before the preseason game, and Joe Reed has barely gotten any preseason reps at all. I'm just wondering, what was the severity of Austin Proehl's injury for the fact that he was let go? It's unfortunate. I thought that this was going to be a very nice surprise, And I was really interested to see how he was going to do on special teams.
Yep. So real quick, so the guys that were cut today, do you have a list up in front of you?
I do. So you had your long snapper, Ryan Langen, obviously Austin Proehl, tight end Matt Siebert, who they had just signed on a very short term last week, offensive tackle Kyle Spalding, linebacker Damon Lloyd, and defensive line Chris Okoye.
All right. So of all of the guys, I think Austin Proehl is the clear surprise cut. And I'm not going to jump the gun. I'm not going to sit here and say that was a terrible move. And I'm not going to say that the team was wrong in doing so. But I would like to hear from Staley and company what went into the decision to cut Proehl. Like, if it's just the injury, and if the injury is that bad, like, okay, like I get it. But I genuinely don't know what they saw from other folks on special teams that was better than Austin Proehl. So if somebody can answer that, that would be fantastic. But again, there could be one of those like rabbit in the hat things where Joe Reed is just that guy. And it's not even a competition at this point. Like, it could be. I don't know. And also could be the fact that we're not seeing what the team is really doing in practice behind the scenes. We're just seeing what they want us to see. So that was a weird one. I really enjoy what I saw from Austin Proehl. I thought he was going to have a spot on this team. He seemed to be more effective, at least than KJ Hill. But again, that's just from what we saw. So,
well, we were talking about the position battles to watch for this final preseason game just a couple minutes ago. How about for your starting returner? Has KJ Hill done anything over these last several weeks of training camp, these 2 preseason games, to say to yourself, he's got this position locked up?
Nobody has.
Nobody has. Jason Moore hasn't. Nasir Adderley hasn't. Austin Proehl, unfortunately, just hasn't gotten that much of an opportunity to do it and was cut today. But
Guyton hasn't. Joe Reed hasn't. Like,
that's one to me. If you knew that moving forward, this was going to be obviously an injury that must be more severe than being let on here. But to me, that was one position to where, especially because there's a number of wide receivers that are vying for it, that this role on special teams was going to be one of those separator indicators of where one guy could leapfrog another and get one of those final spots.
Yep. So it'll be interesting to see on maybe some of the next press conferences if they shed some light onto kind of the decisions behind those. But otherwise, I mean, I think we covered the majority of kind of the transaction side. Like, everyone else, I think people would probably say they would have thought would be cut eventually. I hope everything's okay with Austin Proehl. I love what he brought. I thought he was going to make this team. So I think that there's more to it that we don't know about. And then in terms of just kind of overall, I guess last part of this segment or this show today, Jake, is just kind of the latest couple days in terms of some of like the press conference things that people have said. We've heard Kenneth Murray has been gushing about how excited he is to play with this defense. We've heard Brandon Staley talk about how much better Josh Palmer is than he even thought he was going to be. Josh Palmer talked about how he is like mirroring his game after Julio Jones, which if you watch his style of play, like it looks kind of like that. He also mentioned he looks at Antonio Brown and Keenan Allen for the way they run routes. Asante Samuel Jr. is looking more and more comfortable, and he is asking to cover the outside best guys because he wants to be that dude. You heard Coach Staley talk about how excited he is about the interior defensive line and that being
Christian
like a strength.
Covington talked him up today.
Yep, Christian Covington was a great transaction that the team had, and like kind of what he brings to the team. Also, there was one other player that he mentioned that was great for special teams as well as on defense.
He mentioned both Fackrell and Nwosu were going to have big roles defensively, but also on special teams.
Yep. So far, Chargers fans, you have to be energized and excited because the coach and the talk that you were getting early on this year in the hopes that they were giving you in terms of like being multiple and having folks the versatility and getting after the quarterback and being aggressive and play calling and situational and all that kind of stuff. You're seeing it now, like on the football field against other teams. Like, is everything perfect in roses? No. But are we seeing glimpses of what we were promised? Absolutely. And so for that reason, like, we got Seattle coming up, and then week 1 against Washington football team, which, can't wait to get into that one. But Jake, sneak peek for folks who are still listening. We have a pretty darn good guest on the next show. I gotta say, dude, I am so grateful and thankful for all of the conversations we're able to have, obviously between you and me, but with all of the guests that we've had on this show. Like, from player to commentators to beat writers to reporters to Hall of Fame quarterbacks to Jim Trotter. Like, there's so many folks we've been able to talk to. And so just getting the perspective and having a chance to hear from the guys who know way more about football than we do, that will never get old. And so I can't wait to continue to do that for folks who are watching and listening.
It's quite a tease. I know you don't want to give too much away, Dan, and rightfully so. It's fine. But
it's fine.
Dan literally just deflected and went a different direction, just went with the appreciation of everything that has taken place for this show. And again, we're grateful for everybody that has joined us, as well as all of our listeners on here. But yeah, Dan's trying to avoid tipping anything off about this guest that is on the show this week. So simple as that. I'll just let him go with it.
Okay, how about this, Jake? We talked about our guest on today's show.
Guess that's about as close as you're going to get as Dan Wolkenstein is going to give you a hint of who our special guest this week is going to be.
It'll be worth it. All right, so Jake, we're about to get out of here. Anything else we need to tell the good people watching and listening, Chargers Unleashed listeners and viewers worldwide?
Appreciate everyone that has helped, of course, the channel grow, the show grow. We all love talking Chargers football at the end of the day. With the live shows that Dan and I have done over the past several weeks, it's been great to meet, talk to you all, share barbecue recipes, all that jazz. So, yeah, it's been great. I'm ready to start the 2021 NFL season. Let's get to work.
Let's get to work. For Jake Hefner, you can find him and his lovely beard at Jake T. Hefner on Twitter. You can find myself and my not as good beard at Chargers Homer.
You don't have a beard.
It's my point exactly.
You're peach fuzz.
You can find us on Twitter at LAC_Unleashed. Obviously, please subscribe to us, give us a thumbs up and a like. Turn on your notifications so you can see who we're going to be interviewing next in our next shows coming up. But until then, enjoy the week. Take deep breaths. Let's enjoy the preseason we have left. And we'll talk to you next time on Chargers Unleashed.
It's clear to you that de-icing the wings will not be done in a jiffy. You look for phone outlets, but see none. Only photos of phone outlets. A voice announces your gate is now 39C, 12B, 9A. It's like musical chairs, if musical chairs made you sob in the pet relief area. A child picking his nose stares. His parents have abandoned him. The airport will raise him now.
Don't let flight delays ruin your vacation. Go on a real vacation. GoRVing.com.
You know a spot, but not just a spot. The spot. Actually, with the all-new Nissan Frontier, you know a bunch of them. One for hitting a trail. One for catching a wave. One where this happened.
Yo, where'd our tent go?
Another where the fish get bigger every time you tell the story. Some spots, you made your mark. Others marked you. And one, okay, let's stay away from that one. But the key to these great spots? Being able to reach them in the first place. Your spot is out there. Find your frontier in the all-new 2022 Nissan Frontier. With best-in-class standard 310 horsepower, advanced tech, and 281 pound-foot of torque. Comparison based on 2022 Frontier S versus latest in-market Ward small truck segment. Base models compared based on manufacturer's website.